everyone! Just wanted to let you know that this is going to be my last video with the School of Wok. I just want to say thank you so much to the School of Wok team. I've had such an amazing experience. And of course, I've loved filming these YouTube videos for you. I hope you keep on cooking the recipes that I shared, and I hope you enjoy this very last video. This is an absolutely delicious matcha Swiss roll cake filled with fresh cream, strawberries, and of course, the sponge is flavored with that bitter and sweet, almost smoky matcha green tea powder. Welcome back to Flavor Fridays. The key to this matcha Swiss roll cake, or roulade, is really finely sifted flour. I'm going to do this several times just to ensure that there are absolutely no lumps in the cake. I'm just going to pour the cake flour directly into my sifter, and then I'm going to add baking powder. Baking powder and baking soda are different things. Together, they work well to help cakes rise. The combination of the two work really well together, but some recipes call for just one and not the other. This one's just baking powder. So lastly, to the colander, plain flour, baking powder, and then also my matcha green tea powder. Now, matcha green tea powder you can buy probably online in special Japanese supermarkets. It's very popular in Asia. We have it as a drink, we have it in our baked goods, in our pancakes, anything really. Matcha is a little bit bitter and it's a little bit earthy. That's what I think the flavor is like. Depending on the application, it can be very sweet, like in drinks or baked goods. Or if you just have a matcha tea, it's very bitter. So I'm going to actually sift the flour 3 times, and that really just ensures that my flour has absolutely no lumps in it. So from here, just going to grab another parchment paper, and I'm going to pour this directly into here. Because I'm using matcha powder, which is very finely ground, if I don't sift it enough, then it will create little lumps of matcha green tea powder in my cake, which is why I'm sifting it so many times. Normally, I would just maybe sift it once. If I'm making a quick bread, like a banana bread, I wouldn't even bother sifting it. But since I want this cake to be super light and fluffy, this is an extra step that I'm taking. You can see the difference between the very first sift and this last one now. You can see that the matcha powder has incorporated a lot more evenly into the rest of the flour. And that's exactly why I'm doing this step. Once you've sifted all your flour, you can either keep it in the parchment and set it aside. I'm just going to pour it back into the bowl and then set it aside. Now with my 4 eggs, I'm going to separate my eggs. So crack my egg. Crack your egg on a flat surface. Otherwise, if you crack it on the back or on an edge of a bowl or a pan, because it's a curved edge, often the shells, the cracked shells will go into the egg and then break your yolk. And then that's how you get cracked egg shells in your food. So do it on a flat surface. It is very difficult to whip egg whites if there's any bit of yolk in it. So just be very careful when you're doing this step. In baking, it's also very important to have room temperature ingredients. So these eggs I've already taken out of the fridge, or you leave it on the countertop overnight. I want the egg yolks to be room temperature. They whip much more when they're room temperature. Meanwhile, egg whites, on the other hand, they whip a lot better when they're cold. So once I separate these eggs, I'm going to put the egg whites into the fridge, and then I'll immediately start beating my egg yolks. Okay, so I've separated my eggs. Egg whites go into the fridge. Egg yolks I'm gonna put into the stand mixer to whip. I've just combined my egg yolks and some sugar into the stand mixer. I beat it until it almost doubles in volume. And the test here is that once you lift it out of the bowl, it should leave ribbons in the batter, just like so. So now that the egg yolks and the sugar have doubled in volume, I'm going to switch bowls and handles, and I'm going to beat my egg whites now. I've just whisked my egg whites with half of the sugar, and what I'm looking for is nice kind of soft peaks. Nothing too stiff because I'm not making a meringue. The biggest test is to flip it on its side and you just see these beautiful soft ribbons. Again, just a nice smooth foam, almost like on a really nice flat white. Now that I've whisked my egg whites, I'm going to return to my egg yolk mixture, combine the two, add the flour, add some milk, and then it's into the oven. So just maybe a third of my egg whites going in now. You don't have to be too gentle with this part because you're just looking to lighten the mixture. Once you've lightened that mixture, then you can gently fold in the rest of your egg whites. Very, very gently. You don't want to ruin any of the air bubbles that you've so carefully whipped, either by hand or with the machine. So when I fold in my egg whites, I'm turning the bowl and I'm almost cutting my spatula right through the center, like an S shape. Once I've got a nice even mixture, I'm going to add in a little bit of milk. Fold it in very gently. And then I'm also just going to very carefully add in my sifted flour mixture as well. A little bit at a time. So into a nice thin cake tray, you want to bake a big flat sheet of cake so that you can roll it into a nice roulade. I'm just going to grease the pan with a little bit of vegetable oil around the sides, just so that the parchment can stick onto the baking tray. And this is just to ensure no cake sticks to the tray. Place the baking sheet right on. And I left a little bit of an overhang around the sides because this is going to help lift the cake out later on. A really good tip for any type of cake that you want to make, leave a bit of an edge around the sides. When you pour it in, lower the bowl quite close to the tray so that you don't drop it from a height and lose any of those air bubbles. Now that you've spread the cake in a nice even layer, I'm just going to give it a tap to make sure it's covering all edges of the tray. And then it's into the oven just for around 10 to 12 minutes or until it's nice and evenly baked. So with the strawberries, small tiny paring knife, I'm just going to take out the top. And then very, very finely dice it. With the tiniest knife in the world. After I finely dice the strawberries, I'm just going to whip some cream, and I'm just going to do this by hand. I don't have a stand mixer at home, so most of the time when I'm cooking at home, especially baking as well, I'm just cooking with using a hand whisk. Halfway through whipping the cream, I'm just going to sweeten it with a little bit of sugar. Not too much, this is really up to you. My strawberries are really nice and sweet. And then continue whipping. So I've reached stiffed peaks with my whipped cream. I'm just going to keep it in the fridge. If it needs a little refresher, then I'll whip it again right before we fill our cake. So while the cake is nice and warm, I've just taken it out of the oven, and I'm just going to run my knife along the edges to make sure it isn't sticking to the sides, which it isn't. It's releasing itself quite nicely. So a tip that our fellow chef tutor told me share was to sprinkle a little bit of caster sugar onto the parchment that you flip the cake onto. This helps it stay nice and sweet, moist, and also helps it retain its shape. Now that I flipped the cake, remove the parchment. It's up to you which side you want to be the one facing the outside. It doesn't really matter, but preferably you want the side that doesn't look quite as nice on the inside of the cake. So in that case, that was the top of my cake. So I'm just going to flip it back onto that side, and then I'm going to very carefully roll the cake into a C shape. Trim off any excess parchment just so it's not hanging around the sides. And another tip is I'm actually going to wrap all of this in cling film or plastic wrap, which keeps the steam inside the cake, keeping it nice and moist. So the whole cake going into some cling film, and now it kind of looks like a Wellington. And that goes into the fridge just to cool, not very long, maybe just half an hour until the cake is nice and set. Now that the cake has cooled in its rolled shape, for around 30-40 minutes, I'm going to unroll it and then fill it with the whipped cream and the strawberries. Now that I have filled my cake, it's time to roll. We are going to trim the edges, and if a little bit spills out, don't worry because we're going to clean it all up. I'm going to pop this into the fridge again, just so it's nice and chilled and set before I slice and dig in. My filled Swiss roll cake has just been chilling in the fridge for maybe half an hour, so now I am going to slice it. I'm just going to trim off the sides with a nice sharp knife. I'm going to sprinkle some confectioner's sugar on top, and then I'm ready to put it onto my cake plate. And here is your final matcha Swiss roll cake. I am so excited to taste my matcha Swiss roll cake. Cut myself a small slice for now. If you are making this at home, I would keep it in the fridge just so the whipped cream and the strawberries stay really nice and fresh. Time to try my cake. Oh. I really miss Asian style cakes where we love filling layers of our cake or a roulade with lots of fresh cream and lots of fresh berries. If you try this recipe, let us know in the comments below. Subscribe to our channel, and if you want to see more baked goods recipes on this channel, leave a comment below as well.